Looking at it in more material terms, I would say the greatest achievements have been in the area of social benefits, in terms of improvements in health, education. But in terms of foreign policy also, there have been important gains made. In the area
Caribbean revolutionary Maurice Bishop lists the successes of his Grenada government. One of the prettiest of the Caribbean islands, Grenada's had nearly 2 years of radical socialist rule under Prime Minister Bishop. He still claims full popular support, though he has not yet called any elections. Things have not been made any easier for the Grenada Revolution by the island's political isolation. Apart from Cuba, all the other Caribbean governments are moderate or right-wing. And so the voice of Radio Free Grenada is often a lonely one, and the new Reagan administration in Washington could make it lonelier still. The radio station has a special significance for the revolution. It was one of the first targets for the Bishop supporters in the early hours of March the 13th, 1979. A news bulletin told Grenadians that the discredited regime of Sir Eric Gairy had been ousted. Gairy had ruled since 1974, when the island gained independence after 200 years of British rule. The coup was virtually bloodless, and Gairy himself was out of the country at the time. Gairy's official residence was quickly occupied by the revolutionaries, and though it was said to have been ransacked by his own men before they left, the Bishop supporters still found loads of documents pointing to corruption and oppression under the old regime.
This is shocking. Just go straight to that.
Maurice Bishop, who had himself been imprisoned by Gairy, led the search of the building, which also produced evidence of Gairy's interest in voodoo and witchcraft. Nearly 2 years later, Grenada wears the badges of its revolution proudly. Instead of garish advertising boards at the roadside, revolutionary slogans call out their political message. And not in Spanish or Russian. Grenada has been called the world's only English-speaking revolutionary state. At the United Nations, it almost invariably aligns itself with the Cuban Soviet group. The new government has not turned the old system completely upside down, though. This bank has been taken over, but it's the only financial institution to be nationalized. It operates in open competition with private banks. One of the new priorities is the building of low-cost dwellings. Grenada's total population is only 110,000, the size of a large town in many parts of the world, but it's still short of housing. This is a government project, and the cement is donated by Cuba, one of many examples of aid from Fidel Castro. The Grenada government is also providing long-term interest-free loans on completed dwellings, so that almost all Grenadians will be able to afford them. For the first time in their lives, many Grenadians will be able to exchange their wooden shacks for the comforts of a modern home. Another area where Cuba is giving help is public health. There are some Peace Corps volunteers from the United States working here too, but the chief clinic doctor is Cuban. The influx of medical personnel from Cuba has doubled the number of doctors in Grenada, and the benefit to the people is visible already, especially among the young. Grenada's new leaders have a lot to thank Cuba for. Besides health and housing, Cuba's involved in a number of reconstruction programs and has helped to fill the financial gap left when the United States cut off practically all aid to the revolutionaries. Maurice Bishop makes no secret of how important the Cuban help has been.
It is very important. It's been speedy. It has come at a critical time when we needed it most. It has been the kind of aid that has been productive in the area of fishing, for example, 10 fishing boats, assistance with establishing a fishing school, the international airport, which is the single biggest project any government in Grenada has ever undertaken. So the speed has been important. The type of assistance has also been important. And therefore, for us, we certainly regard it as being of the greatest importance to the building of the economy.
And is Cuba helping you militarily?
Cuba did help militarily. That assistance is no longer necessary.
You've taken a left-wing path, yet the Caribbean generally has moved towards the right. Doesn't this make you feel isolated?
I don't think the Caribbean generally has moved to the right, first of all. I think it is true that some recent election results have put in power or returned to power governments that some would categorize as right-wing, and probably with justification. But I think that among the Caribbean masses, there is a much greater understanding of the way forward, a much greater understanding of the fact that the old path of industrialization by invitation, for example, has failed, that the old paths that have been followed have not brought any benefits for them, and that they are very anxious for a change. I think that's one of the major reasons for the support among the Caribbean masses as opposed to their leadership for the Grenada Revolution, because they understand that here there is a genuine new experiment being conducted, and they are anxious to see what will result and will come out from that experiment. We do not.
The Grenada experiment has certainly generated a lot of interest in left-wing Afro-American circles. Grenadian radicals have returned from exile, and others have come from the United States or other Caribbean islands to give their help. Some are teachers, and one day a week they train the local teachers in educational methods. The new scheme doesn't mean children have a day off school. Instead, the teacher's role is taken over on the fifth day by parents, who thus become more involved in school affairs themselves. In the agriculture sector, the government claimed a 26% increase in exports of cocoa, nutmegs and bananas in the first year. But Grenadians are also being encouraged in a new effort to produce vegetables for self-sufficiency. The new airport project mentioned by Maurice Bishop will cost an estimated $40 million, a quarter of that sum coming from Cuba. Previously, foreign visitors have had to fly into Barbados, then continue by boat or small aircraft. There have been rumblings in the American State Department that Cuba might want to use the new airport as a staging post for airlifting its troops to troubled spots. A boost in tourism is also hoped for when the new airport is operational. Officials have spoken in terms of a tripling of tourists. However, holiday bookings for 1981 are well down in comparison with previous years, and the Grenadian government has gone as far as accusing the United States of using dirty tricks against the island. Officials claim that a recent survey of 25 New York travel agents resulted in 19 of them advising inquirers not to go to Grenada because the beaches were covered with barbed wire and there were Cuban and Soviet troops all over the place. 17 of them then admitted the information came from the US State Department. All our reporting team saw, though, was bamboo huts and bikinis, no barbed wire or soldiers. Grenada now hopes that the loss of American tourists will be offset by visitors from Europe. Tourists who leave the beaches and the air-conditioned hotels find a very different Grenada, but it's still a welcoming one. Even the poorest have their culture, and the African musical tradition is strong. One of the small islands that makes up the main island's capital is St. George's. Social structures are being changed by the new leaders, who say there is a new spirit of pride and energy among the people. Critics say, though, that much of the early goodwill for Bishop has evaporated, especially over his record on human rights. He admits there are 100 political opponents in jail who face sentences of 15 years, 25 years or death if convicted. And since there have been no elections, there are those who say Maurice Bishop is an enemy of democracy.
You are an enemy
he doesn't agree.
As a matter of fact, we believe very firmly that Westminster elections are just about the lowest form of democracy that exists. We feel that very firmly. What it has done traditionally is provide democracy for just about 5 seconds in every 5 years. I would say, without making a firm statement about it, that we are unlikely to hold a Westminster form of elections, that the kind of elections we are likely to hold will come out of a new constitution. Our preference right now is the establishment of a Constitution Commission made up of appropriate people in the region who have experience in that area. After discussions on that, and bearing in mind the views of the masses, this commission would then go back and come up with a new constitution, which we would then want to submit for a popular plebiscite to determine. Out of that process, we prefer to see an election come.
There'll be no constitutional debate in the opposition newspaper Torchlight, though. It's been closed by the government. Some people say Maurice Bishop has overreacted against his political critics, including hostile neighbours like Trinidad and Tobago. Certainly, the new Grenada has reason to feel isolated, especially since the crushing election defeat in Jamaica last year of Michael Manley's left-wing government. Domestic troubles have surfaced at the docks, where unions have made high wage demands after the government legalised strikes for the first time in years. But what does Bishop think of his most dangerous opponents now in jail who tried to overthrow him?
You have to see this in terms of the fact that people went into the revolution for different reasons. Some for pure personal gain, some so as to become big marijuana capitalists, to grow marijuana on a large scale. Others because they felt that this gave them the opportunity to exercise personal power and for whatever it is they believe in. And it is really from these three broad categories I've just defined that the various attempts have come.
Like all revolutionaries, Maurice Bishop hopes that educating the young in the new ideas will help to create a country built according to his vision. The theory seems to be that you can't start early enough. Even the youngest classes here are learning new words to an old song, words of revolution. If you love the revolution, stamp your feet. What many outsiders would like to see, elsewhere in the Caribbean and in the wider world, would be the sign of Grenadians casting their votes as well. That would be a true test of popularity and democracy. Maurice Bishop has given details of his own plans for what he regards as a better style of democracy than the British model, one that he says is more representative of the people. He now has the authority to turn rhetoric into reality.